we're talking about next is sometimes called East Central Europe, sometimes it's considered Northeastern Europe. The term I prefer is something that the people of the area once called it, the Kresy, K-R-E-S-Y. And the Kresy was just meaning we're from here. And really that's the only way you can describe geographically this area. There were no natural borders to this region in the past, and in many ways currently. Although today we can point to certain rivers and such to give a general description. So a general description would be this region of nations that we call today Poland, Lithuania, Belarus, the Kaliningrad exclave of Russia, and Western Ukraine. And this area was vastly inhabited by Slavs by the 6th century. In the northern areas, there's of course a mixture of the Baltic-speaking peoples in areas that we think of as Lithuania today or along the Baltic coast, but there were also many other Baltic-speaking tribes that no longer exist, like the original Prussians, who were a Baltic-speaking people. Today, if we look at the boundaries of some of these nations, it has changed because of events that happened during World War II or after World War II. So, for example, Poland now has a western border that goes to the Oder River in against Germany, and that's something that was really a new border much farther west than they ever were. Basically, there was a trade-off with Stalin that Poland be shifted to the west. And then another border was kind of picked, the western Bug River, which is actually in eastern Poland today, and the southeastern corner of Bug looks like Bug, B-U-G. And again, artificially created a border that wasn't there after World War II. But the reason that this area is hard to define is because they're in the North European plain, and generally it's a mixture of farmlands or agricultural type lands and forests, some bogs and marshes, some things we were talking about in the southern Baltic areas as well. And there's nothing really, there's east to west, there's nothing that kind of delineates this territory. And the very far north is the Baltic Sea, and the more southern areas generally are stopped by the Carpathian Mountains. But in between east to west, it's hard to see. And the people of that area also did not have a sense of belonging to a particular group with a strong adherence. And this is the greatest difficulty to understanding this area. And I want to talk first about nations and nationalism. In America, it's very easy for us to talk about us as a nation. We define nation as an American nation as being generally a territorial unit of the United States, being born, for example, in the United States, and in a sense, in terms of citizenship. You can become an American by taking an oath to the U.S., etc. So there's to be part of the American nation. Generally, it's just this very loose idea that adheres to a territory, a sense of country. Nation in Central Europe especially has always had changing meanings depending on the time period. In the medieval time period, let's talk first about this idea of being Polish. In the medieval time period, to be Polish meant that you were part of the noble class and that you had adherence to the Duchy of Poland. Over time, what meant to be Polish changed. Polish sometimes is a linguistic distinction. If you spoke the Polish Slavic dialect, could mean that you're Polish. It has at times been a religious meaning. In areas of what we call Belarus today, or this western Ukraine, if you were Catholic, then sometimes you were considered Polish. So there's a linguistic dimension at times. There's a religious distinction at times. There's this elite nobility distinction. There's also a cultural term. So you could be well educated during this time period. Somehow you made it to a university or something in the 1700s or 1800s. And this could mean, if you're from this region, that you were Polish. So it was like a cultural distinction. Sometimes being Polish is a territorial distinction. Maybe that you were from the kingdom, or in the boundaries of the kingdom of Poland. What it doesn't mean is, as we project nationalism to mean today. Today we imagine Poles being those who were born in the Polish territorial unit of the country Poland today. Okay, that reference has no meaning in the past, really prior to World War I. We can't project onto the past that conception. So who's Polish and who isn't Polish is not an easy distinction in any sense. You could be for example, a Lithuanian noble in the early 19th century living in what is today considered the Belarusian area, and you could have called yourself Polish because possibly of this cultural distinction. You could be a Polish-speaking peasant in Ukraine, and therefore you're Polish. You could be just a Ukrainian who is Catholic, and sometimes then you'd be calling yourself Polish. So it's such a mix. It's such a dynamic kind of character, and people would like to take their modern nationalism and project it on the past. So when people tell Polish history today, they talk about this unit of Poland, and they ignore the fact that there was this union with Lithuania, and project themselves as the saviors of Europe, that they stopped Islam, and they've done all these things, and Poland is this continuous unit, except for the time period, the partitions in the 1700s, and to be Polish has this Polish character of rebellion and of this long, great history. And to some extent, yeah, those things happened. But it also could mean that you could have the exact same story from the Lithuanian perspective, which also united with the Polish crown by the Lublin Union in the 16th century. So Lithuanian history is completely tied with Polish history, and they have this vast swath of territory that goes from the Baltic coast to the Black Sea in the 1600s. This great state, this Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. But the Lithuanians forget the Polish side of this history, and the Poles forget the Lithuanian side of this history. And where are the Belarusians? Well, they're the peasants in what we consider the Lithuanian section today. So the capital city of Vilnius, which the Poles consider a Polish city, the Lithuanians considered the heart of Lithuania. Well, in fact, in the 19th century, it was the land surrounding Vilnius, and much of Vilnius was made up of what we consider Belarusian people today. And who are the Belarusians? Well, Belarusians were those living in this Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth type area who were generally Orthodox. But sometimes it just meant that you're Belarusian if you had a more Belarusian character to your dialect. And these dialects are very fluid as well. Belarusian is kind of a combination of Russian and Polish. And what about the Ukrainians? Well, the Ukrainians had their own slightly different dialect from the Belarusians, and they were more in the southern territories. But again, the Poles controlled much of this area during this Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which lasts from the 16th century all the way to the partitions of Poland. And so it's all a great mix. And so when you approach this history, you need to come with this perspective. You can't come with the American nation perspective of nationalism. We can't project that kind of vision on the past. And all of these nations, the Lithuanians, Poles, and Ukrainians, all do this. They project this long history that goes straight to the past, wherever their foundation is, and then try to talk about a cohesive unit. And this is how they justify actions and territories today. So be very careful when we're reading, very careful when you hear their history as it's told. And that's it for this section.